I'm Hadrian Predock, and I'm an architect and professor from the USC School of Architecture. And on behalf of Dean Brett Steele and our entire academic community and faculty, staff, and students, I extend a warm welcome to an evening with Olafur Eliasson and Johanna Burton. Yay. I had the distinct pleasure of hosting Olafur to the Visions and Voices series in 2018, 6 years ago, and I'm super happy to welcome him back to LA and the USC campus. So as we gather here tonight, the University of Southern California and MOCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles, acknowledge that this event is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnerships and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. USC is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Quiche and Tongva peoples. We honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. Now, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing David Martin, who has been instrumental in bringing tonight's speakers together. David and his wife, Mary, are both USC alums and have spent over a decade supporting creative work with USC and the School of Architecture. Their foundation has done work across USC, including designing Tudor Hall and other buildings on campus that have created space for students to gather and feel a sense of belonging. In addition, Mary Martin serves as a trustee at the Museum of Contemporary Art. Both David and Mary Martin are directly involved in all of the projects taken on by their firm, MAD Workshop, a design education-oriented foundation that is based in learning by doing and by being makers-focused. Most of their projects have been with university partners, and their work has been far-ranging and diverse, from a temporary floating school from the LA Unified School District in MacArthur Park to art performances in an 18th century chapel in Varese, Italy, from homeless housing to activating urban spaces, from furniture to fashion design, and taking part in 2 Venice Biennale exhibits. Wow. Most importantly for tonight is that David and Mary's Mad Workshop Foundation is the lead support for Olafur Eliasson's exhibition at MOCA titled Olafur Eliasson Open, which is part of the Getty Pacific Standard Time Initiative Art and Science Collide. So I hope everyone will go out and see that show as soon as it opens next weekend. And most importantly, I would like you to welcome David Martin and join me having him on stage to introduce tonight's speakers for the conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Hadrian. It's such a thrill for Mary and I to be part of this great adventure with Olafur Eliasson and Johanna Burton. We're just thrilled to be involved. Olafur's work is about us. It's about humanity, how we react with one another. We react with the environment, the natural environment that's out there. Olafur uses devices as simple as observation to mechanical contraptions and high technology to take very big and complicated ideas, distill them down, and bring them down into the landscape, the architecture, and the galleries. And the accessibility to his ideas, particularly in the galleries, is just profound. We all participate with his ideas. And this is not just for connoisseurs of contemporary art, it's for all of us. A good example of that is when he created the program called Weather for the London Tate Modern, where some 2 million people over a summer visited his exhibit. The other thing that adds tremendous interest to his projects is his easy ability to collaborate, to bring in experts, to bring in students, and to get a large number of people contributing and adding to these ideas. Mary and I were able to visit his studio in Berlin this summer, kind of this old converted brewery courtyard, just a fabulous place where the magic happens, filled with people creating architecture, art, and distributing these ideas to various places around the world. Olafur, almost by the nature of his work, has become an environmental leader. And I think one way to talk about that is when he and his associates brought an Arctic iceberg to the streets of Paris and put it out in front of an environmental convention. I mean, could you imagine coming around the corner and seeing this? But your mind, everybody's mind, would go to what is the state of our planet? And it's that kind of interaction that drives his thoughts. Olafur's affinity with MOCA is very important and around those environmental concerns. Let me say a few words about MOCA. One thing that's important is that it has a major component of the artists themselves being part of the process of the museum. On the board, a wonderful group of trustees, but there's also a wonderful group of artists making the key decisions. I think over the period of the life of MOCA, there has been a series of directors that are almost characters in the world of contemporary art. And they have left a legacy of incredible shows, unparalleled shows about contemporary art, and a permanent gallery of art, a permanent collection of one of the best contemporary art galleries in the world. I think one of those characters, one of those directors, I would say with a real sense of what would you say, a sense of wonderful character. One of those directors is Johanna. And Johanna brings a tremendous experience to the museum, but really uniquely in this world, she represents the next generation of thought. And it's so important for an institution in this time of change to have a perspective of what happens next. How do we involve the next group of people? One of her other extremely important roles at MOCA is to be part of their environmental council. This is a council run by artists, enlightened trustees, and Johanna, where they make sure that MOCA not only talks the sustainable talk, but walks the walk, that the MOCA becomes an exemplary institution in terms of environmental sustainability. And I think with that connection and the connection with Olafur, I want to introduce them and hand the stage over to both of you. So, thank you very much.
I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction and then head right into a discussion with Olafur, and I think one with you as well. Huge thanks to the Martins, without whom this project simply wouldn't be possible. And it's always beautiful when you have patrons who weave together relationships as well. So being here at USC is incredible. And I want to thank Brett and Hadrian, Visions and Voices, and also the curators for this project from MOCA, Jose Luis Blondet and Rebecca Lowry are out there in the audience. Also thanks to all of the MOCA staff. So I'm just going to dive in and say, I think David set this up very beautifully, which is you have a long, actually, we'll talk about this more, a long relationship with LA. clearly a long relationship with thinking about environmental issues. We are setting the stage for this conversation in a pretty intense moment of political context, but also, if I read the news correctly, the hottest day recorded in California's history was either today or yesterday. So thinking about the environment is something that one does not just sort of atmospherically, but quite clearly. And we're going to talk about your interest in placemaking, which I think is something architecture students will have quite a lot of interest in. For those of you who haven't been to the MOCA space where Olafur's show is being installed as we speak, it's a beautiful old building, a repurposed warehouse space, kind of unlike any other. And I know that you had always hoped, you've done other projects in LA, but to be in that space. And we'll talk about how specifically you've taken up residence in that space. It's a space that had a storied history, actually mostly housing police vehicles in its incarnation before becoming the museum, but is a gorgeous space that allows artists to really go wild. You didn't go wild, but you did a lot, so we'll talk about that. And Olafur, when we were talking about titles, and we'll end up here, back and forth, and in the end, came up with a title which I think will inform our whole talk, Open. What does it mean to be open? As a building, as an artist, as a practice, in conversation. And so I think tonight that's where we will sort of set our sights, and you're gonna get a preview before anybody else of some of the elements of that show in a moment. So I'm gonna kick off by asking you a question that I think gets to the heart of your practice, which is, how does art help us reflect on our own relationships with nature and with each other at this moment in time?
What was the question? Johanna, thank you so much, and thank you for coming, and it's so exciting to be back. And thanks to David and Mary for making all of this possible. And it was in 2018 I was here. I just realized 6 years ago, so I probably haven't seen any of you. I was afraid that it would be redundant. The question was, how does it...
How do you, I mean, your work really allows us to contemplate our relationship with nature. That's something you've thought about very differently, but very continuously over the last 3 decades.
Yeah, I think there is, there's my relationship with nature, and then there's the relationship with nature that a person has coming into an exhibition. And in my case, the relationship with nature stemmed from growing up in an environment where nature was very fragile, in the Arctic or semi-Arctic Iceland, where I come from. And I grew up in Denmark, so I could really appreciate Iceland because I didn't get to be there all the time. And typically I would be in the countryside or in the mountains and so on. And what is unique about Iceland is that when it's Arctic, it grows very slow. So you would have a moss path on the floor, and that moss path would then be 30 years old. And this means if a car comes and drives over it, there would be a car track. It would take another 30 years before the car tracks are gone. So the sort of hypersensitivity or the kind of fragility of nature was quite clear. If you would hike through the landscape, you would see that even this a little bit of weather change would change the landscape a lot. And I think that in the 90s, when the Kyoto Protocol was done, and even when I heard about the ozone layer hole being closed in the 70s, knowing Iceland and having a much sort of, we should be careful to say it's anything to do with truth or essence or something, but I had a very close relationship with nature. I felt I understood it because it was very hard to get anything to grow, for instance, right? And so when the first emerging sort of climate questions came, was it like in the 90s, I said, oh, I know what they're talking about. So it wasn't really that I sort of dived into climate and sort of climate consciousness. It was something that I already had been thinking about. so to speak. And maybe importantly, the weather project that was mentioned at the Tate in 2003, with a very big sun in the turbine hall and a bit of smoke and mirror, you could say. That actually, at the time, some people said, "Oh, this is this new thing called, with the climate, the global warming, climate change." And 2003, and other people said, "Oh, this is like a Japanese garden, or this is like a Apocalypse Now," because it looked like the poster of the Coppola movie, Apocalypse Now. So, and then 5 years later, everybody said, "Oh, that's that piece about climate change." And then now everybody says, "Oh, that was really early. My God, you were before everybody else." But it so happened that my relationship with nature was maybe the language I was interested in, but my core interest also was what does it mean to be a human in the context of nature? So perception, experience, psychology, and all these things, they were sort of the drivers. So nature became a kind of more like a language, but what it did to me and what it did to us, how we, how nature would alter the way we see the world and what does nature mean to us, is still, I haven't changed. I was basically doing the same today as I did back then. It's like going in circles.
I'm going to actually show, David alluded to this as well, the Ice Watch work. And one thing that you're talking about that maybe you can talk about a bit more is there's, let's say, an eco-consciousness about this work, but it's not, the work isn't about climate change in a sense. It's about relationships.
In this particular case, it was on the occasion of the UN summit, the climate report, the so-called Paris Agreement was made, and I was working with the UN directly and with the mayor's office in Paris to get the permit. I had good connections because it was not easy. It was funded and sponsored by Bloomberg Philanthropy, I should mention also. And so a lot of people came together. And what essentially, to make a long story short, is I think interesting is that everybody kind of knows what glacial ice or the glacier looks like. So from a distance you say, look, oh wow, ice. This is glacial ice. You can also see the color, doesn't really show here, but it's like kind of bluish. It's very beautiful. But when you walk up to the ice, you realize, oh my God, this is 20,000 years old, or 50,000, or 10,000. And if you stand there, it crackles. It has these small bubbles because the ice has a lot of pressure on it. It's very heavy. So the bubbles of air that is caught inside of the ice are pressured, so it pops like popcorn. It's very interesting. When you go to Greenland, you will find out it goes like a popcorn pot. And if you think about it, that little bit of air is 20,000 years old. So and it's very cold. So in a little bowl in the ice, you would maybe have a little collection of that air. So you could lean in, you could sniff it up. You could literally breathe 20. And back then the air was quite clean. Evidently, it was a very clean air, and it was of course melting within 5 to 7 days. It would all melt. And this idea that 20,000 years just suddenly disappeared and ran into the sewer in Paris. And so there was this difference between knowing about it, seeing it from the paper and go, oh, this is ice, and then actually walking up to it and then see, oh my God, it's really beautiful. It's very touching. And you put your hand on it, go like, whoa, it's really cold. And interestingly, it's really cold because it's ice, right? But still, the knowledge that you have from actually experiencing it is not the same place in the brain. So you go like, wow, that's an experience. Or in German, you say Erfahrung, because it's not the same as experience. It's a stored knowledge. You held something 20,000 years old in your hand. You were holding hands with something that was very touching, or it touched you, so to speak, quite literally. And this is, I think, there is something quite beautiful in that. And in the sense, one could say, everyone made their own narrative. It was a gesture. It offered something which had to do with vulnerability, maybe. And you could also say the vulnerability of the ice, evidently, but also the vulnerability of you. So you stand there and you just look at it, and it's so disarming, and you go like, oh, wow, my God, you know, what? And it's like even difficult to kind of actually articulate should I do this? What's going on here? This is so touching. Of course, I hope that's how people saw it. And I think that in that moment, there is an opportunity to be open, to get the title back in, right? Because suddenly you're open. And that's an interesting place to be, because if you're open, you might also slow down. And if you slow down, something else happens than if you don't slow down. Slowing down is like actually not the same as continuing as usual. In the public program, there's a whole group of workshops on slowing down. We can talk about that later. Slowing down. Yeah, it's very nice.
It's interesting too, in past things you've written or spoken about, you've talked about that slowing down in kind of Hollywood terms also as a kind of high definition moment. So you see something that maybe you wouldn't see, or you see its edges differently. And though it is about human experience, you seem to also open the door to non-human being. I put here on the screen some of the sun and wind drawings, and we'll talk about an inclusion of some related work as well. Can you talk a little bit about how these works are produced and if there's a high definition?
Yeah, first of all, I'm interested in high definition in the sense that I think that museums, in an exhibition or an artist studio or a work of art, you don't step into a museum to step out of the world. No, you step into the museum to see the world in high definition. So you see more, right? Maybe it takes you to slow down, then you see even more. And so in a certain way, the museum or the artwork or the artist studio or whatever is a microscope through which you see things in higher granularity. So that's sort of a principle. See, now, in that process, there's this idea that maybe sometimes nouns becomes verbs. You could say maybe maybe it's not an artwork. It is maybe artworking. This is not the earth, it's earthing. This is not the world, it's worlding. So if everything becomes verbs and everything is kind of trajectories, you can think of the way that Timothy Morton talks about, how objects has its own intentionality and intentions. You can talk about the actor network theory of Bruno Latour, or the work of Doreen Massey on trajectories, the cultural, economical geographer who did the very first work on colonialization. See the fact that we make the mistake to think that we move into a museum and we meet up with the artwork sitting still in the museum. That's not how it is. The museum is on a move. The work of art is on a move. It might be an old painting painted 100 years ago. It's been traveling through 2 world wars to get to you. But it's a meeting up of many trajectories. But there's intentions that are meeting up. It's a crossroad. Right? And it's interesting. At a crossroad, you are offered the opportunity to change your mind. Like Bayo Komolafe says, this is where the pocket thieves and where you might run into all kinds of people who are up for no good at the crossroad. But it's also the opportunities. You come to the crossroad, you slow down and you change your path, and you don't go the way you intended to. That's a little more complex, I'm sorry. So the idea of more than human, though, to be more specific, there is a stronger and stronger awareness about giving rights of personhood to animals, for instance, right? So we have trees, animals, rivers in various parts of the world who have been granted rights of personhood, often due to the wisdom and skillful knowledge of indigenous people. You have the river in New Zealand, now I don't remember it. And you have a goat in Iran, I think, and you have in Venezuela, you have a whole group of mountains and so on and so forth. Rights of personhood means that the goat can sue the people. Famously, the law firm Earth clients represented the air of London against the city of London because there was more pollutants in the air than it was legal. So the air sued the city, and they won on the second time around because the city had polluted it. And this idea that humans are not this self-entitled, invincible top of the pyramid, as Donna Haraway, I think, says, we are just upright walking mammalian weeds. This notion of that humans might be let a little further down. Also, trees are so amazing. Right? Trees don't waste anything. They don't pollute. They are really great. The trees are fantastic. They are so smart. And they are having conversations, and we are just too dumb to actually understand, it turns out. So why would we be in any superior position to decide over trees? So this is there's a longer and bigger discourse in this, which has to do with more than human, and there's a whole group of academical sort of work going into this, which is really inspiring for an artist.
By the way, there are client Earth people in this room, I know for a fact. So, the client Earth.
Oh, I'm so excited. Client Earth, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been giving you money.
But so, I would be tempted to go more into the sort of move away from humanism and into other beings, but...
Yeah, but just as more anecdotally, because in Iceland, they really worked hard to make the last presidency, the one candidate was the Glaser Snæfellsjökull. They just missed the deadline. They got too late. But they actually looked like they could do it. So next time for the presidency, and there was a fantastic woman who became a president instead. But imagine this stuff. And you know, there's clothing companies. I'm not going to mention who have at the chairman of the board, Mother Nature. Yeah, but it's like, I'm not mentioning it because I know they say they don't do it for advertisement. That's why I'm not mentioning them. But they are doing it. And then the chairman says, no, it's not good for nature. We can't do it.
We have a very active environmental council at the museum. And in some of the conversations we've hosted, people are not so worried that the Earth will disappear. It will just be humankind, and it will be repopulated quite healthily. Will you talk a little bit about the images I have up? Because I think people will want to understand how these drawings are made. They're right there.
Oh yeah, I forgot that. Oh yeah, I can see that. So, yeah, I noted down here that MOCA, as one of the very few museums in America, is joining the Be So Green protocol. So I credit you for that. It was very important. Yeah, and you have been in America among the most radical museums, setting up sort of internal systems for getting onto a climate progressive agenda.
Absolutely. And we tend to want to work with artists who are also...
Yeah, no, but it's fantastic. It's just worth mentioning, I think, because a lot of museums could learn from that. So these are drawing machines, and in this case, it's the wind, and this is shown in a desert, and it's a kind of a wind, it's a diary, a protocol, or like a score, if you want, or it's a kind of maybe a weather report. If you show the next picture, you can see these are, the one is the wind, and the other one, I think, is the sun. Like the white one is the wind. So anyway, it's a brush, and it's very simple. It's a piece of paper that turns in a circle. You could do it at home, and then a sort of a pen or some kind of drawing device that moves according to the wind or the sun or the movement. And there is one that we are just installing now, and it looks great already. Do you have a picture of that too? Yeah, this is the one that is down at MOCA, and every day we are doing it's slightly different. It's actually the weather 50 years ago, today, and the expected weather in 50 years. Of course, we don't really know what that is, but apparently there's lots of companies who make lots of money on predicting what the weather is in 50 years. So we bought the weather report for 50 years from now, and then we mix that in. So what we are doing is a kind of meteorological document. It's an abstract drawing. You will see it when you get there. So we'll hang one every day. You should not come on the first day of the show. There won't be any. But a little later on, you can see it every day it goes. And if it's a very cloudy day, a very stormy day, you should go down and see it again, because then there will be a whole different drawing, because also if the so anyway, 50 years ago today, and if then there's a big gap, the 50 years from now is also very different. So it's more about our ideas that we are trying to control and predict everything that happens. We are obsessed, right? That's why we have traffic lights also to prevent running into someone. But this notion of that success is the degree to which you can predict the CEO, the profit of the company, the capitalism. This is all about predicting things, like the Greenspan predicted this and that, and then this president predicts this and that. See, now, it's obviously interesting to say that maybe we should embrace doubt, uncertainty, and that's why these drawings are so abstract. The idea of not being completely sure. Imagine if that would be the most strong position, to say, I'm uncertain, I'm insecure, and I'm anxious. I don't know what to say. And that is my statement. And then of course, people go like, my God, that's who's that? I was like, why are we even listening to him? But in all honesty, maybe the softness, maybe the tenderness required to embracing someone who is uncertain. Maybe being uncertain is a stronger position than being certain, because nobody really knows, right? Being certain is always just a guess. So this idea that we can maybe also be more honest and say, well, I would like, so bring yourself into this, I would like it to be, and my intention is that this will happen, but I cannot really tell. And I embrace the uncertainty, and I expose my vulnerability, and I would like to think that makes me stronger. This is called art also, right? So in that sense, I think it's like, imagine the weather report for all those years was about saying what happened tomorrow. And in some countries, like England, they're obsessed with it. That's why the weather project was such a big success, actually. There's like, people love the weather. But also here, we have the hottest day of history. God damn it, right? I don't want to be too apocalyptic, but you are doomed. There's so no, I'm serious. There's like, not even joking. So I'm so sorry. There was a small baby here. I'm so fucking sorry. And what are you going to do? Are you going to just turn up the AC more and more and more, right? The earth is collapsing right under your feet. All you need to do is look down. And don't look to the horizon. Look down and around, like Latour said, I think. Bruno Latour, the thinker. So, and then you can also say, what can I do? It's right here, right there in front of you, under your feet, right in that room around you. That is what we can do. And we do that at the studio, like for instance.
I was going to ask you to, exactly, can you talk a bit, here I've put this image up from a recent project, and it'd be great to talk about your sustainability measures at the studio, but also how museums can support practices like this.
Yeah, it's I mean, now you are maybe more on the visitor side, so museum. So in 2020, I had a show at MOT in Tokyo, Museum of Tokyo, fairly large show. And in 2017, 18, when we started working on it, we said we're going to make it as sustainable as possibly possible, which meant, among other things, that we're going to send the show on train through Trans-Siberia, Russia, Mongolia, China, into Japan from Berlin. And then the art handler, the art transport, the insurance company, everybody said, oh, out of your mind. You're not just going to send art through. But of course, this train goes all the time, and they have pencils and washing machines going in. So of course you could send art. And essentially the art handlers, they say, yeah, well, we can. And then, it's funny, some years later, I was at an environmental conference in Bilbao, and then the same art handler was like bragging about how they were sending things on train. We met a couple of years, almost 2 years ago, and we talked. The first thing we did was talk about sustainability. We had a great meeting. My sustainability team, your people, we worked very hard on keeping an eye on that. And there are sailboats. If you are in time, I wasn't, to be honest, but you can send things across the Atlantic with a sailboat, like they do with fancy wine, and so on. So in the studio, we have a sustainability team. We track our carbon emissions. We have now solar panels. We have the whole garbage thing. So when I do a commission, I contracted now in the commission that the carbon has to be taken into consideration when making the commission. And I am fortunate for the time being to have commissions around the world. So this is a big thing. It's like actually has some impact. And one thing is that the one little transport is a thing in it as of itself, but it's also the fact that you create new paths of doing things. And we have great friends who advise us. There are lots of advisory groups, and there's the Earth clients who are here. And it's not so difficult anymore to find out what to do. And one can get better. We travel less. I travel less. It's really great. It's like now you can say to a museum, it's not good for the environment if I have to come all the time. And they say, yeah, that's right. And we try to inspire museums. It was not so hard with you, but often the museums are, in Japan, the museum is a publicly run museum, and the energy is sourced beyond the director of the museum. There was like no influence at the Tate Modern. The same thing. We made them declare a climate emergency, and they were very happy, and so on and so forth. But of course, it's the regional council who runs the Tate. So we could make a declaration, but to actually do the changes is something that takes more work. But we keep doing it. It's not actually a thing. It's just become normal now. It's like, I think it also has become quite normal for people in their households to take one. But it's like the hottest day in history. If it's not normal, I don't know what's happening.
Another thing, and I think we talked about this a little bit, is there's the small, whatever it is, small or big gesture, but it is in a museum, everything is also symbolic and modeling. So it is bigger than the gesture of a single show. And I wondered actually to that end, I come out of a background of education is one way to talk about it, but pedagogy or learning or engagement.
Exactly, yeah.
How do you incorporate that in your practice and beyond even the environmental kind of space? I know we have some images here of...
Yeah, so we have a number of collaborations. This is a particular collaboration. Only just recently we did a little summit in Iceland with the EER group. EER means experience. What does it mean?
Experiment.
Experiment and research, right? So in collaboration with the Aarhus Department for, Andreas Røbstrup, a professor and founding of Interacting Minds Center in Aarhus University. So we got some money from the Carlsberg Foundation, the beer, Carlsberg. And then we are now studying different types of alternative ways of working together as scientists, artists, and should I say other people, other cultural practitioners, and so on. But we have overall done a lot of, for me it's hard enough to get inspired and to reach out to people who are already asking, what is a surprise? I was like, oh, surprise is like when I get surprised. No, but what is it actually? What happens? When is a surprise a good surprise? And when is a bad? So it's like a little bit like this idea of predicting. And then, so it's nice to have a group of people around you who are academically interested in something that is so abstract and so curious. So, for instance, in slowness. So one of the participants is Joe Dumit, who is going to exercise here in the workshop in the public program. Joe Dumit is really recommendable because I think he is such a great source of inspiration for me. He's a professor. I call him professor in slowness, but it's not what it's called, of course. He's at Berkeley, up at Berkeley. I wonder if I have a proper title for him. But a slowness workshop is, of course, for instance, if you sit down, that's not what this is, but what we did at the studio, you sit down on a chair, that takes like a second, like you sit down, it took a second. Sit down in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, in 1 minute, in 2 minutes, not a new experiment. So now try to sit down in 5 minutes. And you're sort of hanging in the air for 5 minutes, and it's really difficult. And the amount of things you can think about in those 5 minutes compared to another 5 minutes where you're doing nothing particular. And this particular, almost like this choreography of going from standing to sitting is spectacular. And I like it because it's something that is so straightforward and easy, something I could have done at home and so on. Of course, he is there guiding, and the same way we have a couple of other experiments in this way. And these are the sort of scientists that we have been collaborating with the EER group over some years now in the studio and at the university or in different places. Like here, we're walking on a glacier in Iceland. It's called Sólheimajökull. And among the exercises was actually to apply to the glacier rights of personhood. So give it human traits. So there was 2 authors, Robert McFarland, who's a fantastic author, Robert McFarland, fantastic. And then Andres Snær, also a fantastic author from Iceland. And they have specialized in writing about ice, among other things, writing about ice. So we gave the glacier, we took it from a noun to a verb. It was glaciering under our feet. So we stood there and it became alive. And you do know that it moves a lot, right? It moves like 2 meters a day at the very front. And then there's the quicksand, the water and mud, and there's like tons of stuff going on. So it's not like just a dead glacier, right? It's melting away right under us. So standing there and trying to imagine that you are standing on something alive. This is a slight simplification, but these are the type of things that are so inspiring to take back to the studio, and then to think about when you do artworks. I have a little list. So I have worked in this way also with Kumi Naidu, who is now at Stanford here, who's the former head of Greenpeace and Amnesty International, who has, of course, an excellent insight into the question about rights, the rights of things, and the former Deputy Secretary General of Human Rights, Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and head of the elders, the UN elders. She also has been often in the studio working with us. She's so insightful and generous and inspiring. And Anna Wirtz-Justice is a neurobiologist who works with circadian rhythm and how light influences our biological clock and so on. So in the studio, and so on and so forth, dancers and art historians and so on, the studio, in order to stay inspired, but also to stay in my time, it's actually very hard, it's very easy to become comfortable and to repeat yourself, especially if it's up to the art market, because the art market has a certain addiction to always wanting the same, because it wants everything to be predictable, because it's about capitalism again. So the art market has this kind of hamster wheeling of your spirit if you don't look out. Did you get that? So it makes you plateau. And so looking for the source of inspiration that keeps you accountable to the times in which you're living is actually always, I think, a thing. And of course, artist colleagues and overall communication, just like talking to the world is a source of inspiration there as well.
I want to note of particular interest, and we hope folks in the audience come to a lot of the programs that happen during the show, but one focuses specifically on lichen, as I understand it.
Yeah, lichen is very slow.
Lichen is very slow.
Lichen is like the small moss on stones. It's not moss, but lichen on a rock. If you go to a place high up, there are small, colorful things that grows on stones. It's called lichen, if you don't know it. And it's very beautiful, and it grows really slow. And if you then take it home into LA, where the air is really bad, it dies and loses its color. It's a little bit like red wine from Italy.
All right, we've got a few more minutes, and then we're gonna. I'm sure there are plenty of people who have questions. I did want to ask you. I've watched your career for the last 30 years, and in fact, there's a slide from one of your shows in the early 90s that I wrote an art form review about. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your trajectory. Here's a really pretty early canonical piece. It's simple, and maybe just walk us through your own thinking over the last 30 years. We were in the back and we were talking a little bit about when you come to the Geffen, it's incredibly serious work, but it's also beautiful, and you experience it with your whole body and your whole self. And a thing that has come up recently, and you brought it up today in terms of capitalism, is spectacle. In a way, though, your work, even from the very beginning, has kind of thought about what will catch an audience's attention and hold it, but how to use that evolving idea of what isn't usually thought about as a critical apparatus, the spectacle. And in a place like Southern California, it's particularly interesting. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit about the word spectacle and how you are using both really humble, I think, materials, and then ones that are incredibly immersive to not give away the game of the show. But to think about your own utilization of beauty and spectacle and pleasure in your work as it continues to evolve.
Yeah, so I was always very interested in the dematerialization of the objecthood as such in art, leaving more space for, well, in the beginning it was a more phenomenological idea and understanding of what is it, maybe it's not what I'm looking at, maybe it is the looking itself that is constitutional. Maybe I'm not looking at an art object the same way I'm consuming something. Maybe I am, by virtue of looking, producing the art object. Maybe the art object is not even there if I'm not looking. Maybe it's like, no, it's still there. So the thing is, the ephemeral and nature, temperature, humidity, the hottest day of history, all these non-quantifiables, largely speaking, now the temperature we can measure, but the things that are relational to a large extent, the things that where I'm sitting here and I see a rainbow, and you're sitting over there, it is by definition not the same rainbow. Because the angle of the drop and the light and what makes your rainbow is a different angle for me. So we can see two different things and we can still have a proper conversation. It was like what makes us different is probably what makes it interesting. What makes us not agree might as well be the success. The vulnerability of conflict is maybe not so bad if it's not always seen as something that is manipulative and extractive. And in the 30 years of working, when I started, I was very interested in Robert Irwin, who passed recently, like a couple of years ago. And so when I came to LA, for the first time, I looked up, I actually got to meet him also, and I looked up, things that had to do with that period. But there was also like, what's his name, Michael Asher. It was like fantastic, right? And there was like all these different things. So there was Robert Morris going on in New York. There was this idea of like a person inside of a column. And that with Robert Irwin was like perfect. So I had a thing that I was interested in. And LA had this openness, it seemed, sort of kind of slightly not together. So New York was so fucking intense with Rosalind Krauss, and then, it's like Donald Judd and Carl. It was like Dan fucking Flavin and all that. Right? There's all these guys, and then LA was just like kind of like, whoa. I like that. It was a little bit like Iceland. But in that there was also the opportunity to find a space for me that was not defined by the rigorousness, but somehow an open space. And so that brings us back to the beginning. And I find that notion quite tolerant, the idea of being hospitable, to host someone with the generosity of actually not necessarily having to agree, to actually host a dinner party where you might actually end up not agreeing, and that's still being a great dinner. It was like as if it's forbidden to have a dinner where you disagree now. It's like everybody's like, ooh, ooh. It's like this. So, because there's no space for vulnerability or tenderness or slowness or these things that I think are interesting to me. And I'm not, evidently I've been so fortunate to be around for 30 years now. Next year, 30 years, not quite 30 years now, but next year I have 30 years anniversary. I can't believe it, and I'm so lucky, knock on wood, on that I'm still showing around the world. I have a show that goes from Auckland, New Zealand, to Manila. It's like wild. And I'm so grateful because the people who come to see the show are fairly young. I mean, much younger than you. And they, no, I'm just kidding. So, and I think that, this idea of never really finishing, as you will see the show, is a kind of like, is it done? Do you know, it's like when I was talking to Peggy Goo, the DJ, I did a music video. If you go on YouTube, it's my name and Peggy Goo, the house DJ. And I was looking at her in the DJ booth just the other day, and she was playing, and she was like building up. And I was like, people go like this, and she was like building up. I was like, fuck, she's been building up for an hour now. When is she gonna actually deliver? And then suddenly she said, my set is over. And I was like, whoa, it was like tantric sex. It's like, it never actually, delivers. And it was, and quite honestly, so if you look at the 30 years, if I'm fortunate to be around still, it might all be, then it's maybe this, I'm still not delivering.
I'm so tempted to end there, but we're going to show you just a couple more slides. This was actually in LA at Mark Fox's space, yeah? And this is, I think, really beautiful to look at in anticipation of the show at MOCA. This is a work that is being shown.
Exactly, yes, yeah.
Should I zoom forward to some preview shots and then open it up to the audience?
Yeah, exactly, yes.
So why don't you talk a little bit about, so this is literally what's being installed at MOCA Geffen right now.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't rain tonight.
Well, so explain what you've done here.
Yeah, it goes through the roof. Actually, literally. It's a kaleidoscope that goes, that sounds funny, it goes through the roof. No, it's a kaleidoscope, like a mirror tunnel box, or like a thing you look through, in which you can stand. It's big enough for you to stand under it and look up. So it's much bigger here, I was about to say. But so you can see the cloud. It's like a blue planet, kaleidoscopically speaking, which is a pixelated or a parcellated, because normally there's a window in the roof there, and it goes up into the roof. And so on a cloudy day, it looks like this, and as the clouds move by, it moves, and when there's a bird or some birds or some planes, there's always some planes in LA, and so on. So this is one of several kaleidoscopes where you can look. That's what I told you. Go into the museum, you see the world outside in higher definition.
And they're really simple. And you're not trying to hide how they're made. And in fact, there's a smaller room of sort of the experiments and the models where you show how simple the mechanisms are.
Basically, it's like Dad makes art in the garage kind of vibe.
And these are plastic bags, right?
Yeah. They're from down by the highway, down by the train tracks. No, the thing, but I actually like that. What I said about the ephemeral quality, it's nice if you can see, okay, there is light on this stage because there are lights there. Imagine if there was no lamps in the room And there would still be light, and everybody would be like, whoa, where's the light coming from? And they wouldn't be focusing on us, right? So it's nice that you are not trying to, in terms of the spectacle, which I didn't really answer that question. See, now there's the capitalist spectacle is the one that hides the lamps. It's just like, whoa, like Siegfried and Roy, like Las Vegas, and like this kind of vibe, right? That's good money, that's like profit. And then there is the kind of spectacular, but also beauty. Just like something that's so beautiful. And I could have done it at home. It's so sweet. I said, like, I can do this home in the garage. I was like, I'm going to make this exhibition in a smaller version in my garage. I love that. I find that really beautiful. And why would we give the spectacular and beauty and you know, the hospitality? Why would we give it away to the fashion industry, to the kind of Las Vegas? Why don't we say the spectacular is ours? We are the fucking museums. We own the spectacular. Why don't we take it? And we'll just show the lamps. We'll just show how it's done. Because people are not stupid. They know what they're looking at. Oh yeah, we wanted questions also.
Sorry, I went forward because I thought maybe you wanted to talk about this one.
Oh yeah. But that's also nice. You can walk around it and see how it's done. See, that's the kind of, that's really easy to do at home, by the way, this one. Really easy. But and I say that with compassion because I think you should. It's so much fun to actually make it. But this is like a kind of cinema screen, you know, so very LA, Hollywood, and like a movie. It's like the next science fiction. It's like a highly abstract science fiction movie. And in slow motion, somewhat slow motion.
And it's the pluriverse.
It's called Pluriverse. Yeah, that's a great title. That's like the pluri means many universes.
Many
right?
universes, right?
Yeah.
So I know one thing we were going to do before we open this up to all of you is there are a series of prompts around the show that you are going to, I don't know, maybe read or maybe ask people to read.
Oh, yeah, I have them here too, so I can read it. No, so so when I work, I actually, I just brought my notebook. I'm so afraid of losing it, so I'm holding on to it. So I'm working on myself for the time being, and that's not really any of your business, but I'm trying to overcome my defensiveness when I work, right? I'm trying to relax my avoidance of pain. It just sounds so great. And I'm serious. I'm trying to, my avoidance of pain, you know, pain of fear, or like, I'm trying to relax my avoidance of what I am afraid of in the museum. It's like also my career, right? Oh my God, the studio is expensive and the art market and all that shit, right? I'm afraid sometimes, not all the time. But and then I try to kind of tackle it, like go there instead of run away. This is just a little glimpse, and out of that, the title "Open" also kind of grew out of that a little bit. And these are the sort of things that I try to tell myself, that I'm open to facing my numbness. And numbness is, of course, when you've been so overstimulated that you get numb. You know, the kind of like when you watch, I don't know, the American election, or when you go to Las Vegas, it's like you get fucking numb, right? You don't know what you feel anymore. You get so, because you put up your defensive layers because you need to protect yourself, right? Your social mask, the armor. You have such a thick armor. So you come into the museum and you feel like, this is nothing. I don't sense anything. Because you're numb. So to actually, to face your numbness, to sensitize yourself, and to vulnerability. Because if you are actually addressing your numbness, right, and you kind of become more sensitive, and you start to sense all kinds of, oh my God, oh shit, ooh, whoa, you're all here. Then you get more sensitive, right? And suddenly you are vulnerable. And then I'm just going to be vulnerable. That's how I'm going to be. And then I'm in this vulnerable, sensitized situation, and then I say, I'm open to receiving a no. And just think about this. Every no comes with intention that comes from a need of someone else. right? A no is born from a need of another person, right? So a no is not just a no, right? You can't live on demand. I demand you do this, I demand you do that. No, I request, as they say in NVC, nonviolent communication, they say, I request. And if you request, you can get a no and you can accept it. There's no people, they get, what did you say no? What? Then they freak out, right? So, and other perspectives, of course, other perspectives is like, no, and then to slowness, we have taught I'm open to slowness and engaging fully with my senses. That's just in case you forgot the numbness one at the beginning. And to explore where I place my attention, that's really interesting because we tend to spread our attention thin. You know, we kind of like go, we have this kind of phone, like the phone, fucking phone, as attention. Right, I'm like that for sure. And then, you know, this idea of putting your attention to one thing is really fantastic. And so this is like a little bit like a formula for how I try to work in the studio. And to fierce tenderness, the tenderness in it as of itself is hard enough to be tender to someone. The fierce tenderness is the one where you take a risk. Like you kind of like actually are so tender. And I'm not talking about a wet noodle type of tenderness, right? I'm not talking about like our overcooked pasta. It's not like, it's not like just because we're in LA, it's not like some hippie tenderness. No, it's like fierce. It's like kind of sharp tenderness, like so compassionate and tender. And then also asking why instead of how. That's more in the process of working. You know, to ask why instead of how. That's what I said, right? So when somebody like you come to me and you say, la, 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 and I say, why? Instead of saying how. It's much more interesting to say why. Why? And you look at architecture, you go, why? In architecture school, we always learn how, right? And also you learn why, of course, but it's very hard to ask why. And if you know why, how is not so difficult, because there's not so many hows. And so relaxing my attachment to outcome, right? That's such a good one, relaxing my attachment to outcome. That's a tough one. Because I was just like, I'm not a success if it's not at the end of the tunnel, so and so. Relaxing my attachment to outcome. That's a very NVC, nonviolent communication also. I can recommend that as a, and also I'm open to wonder. In that case, in my case, wonder is just like being open to the fact that miraculous stuff might just lay around. You might just have to, you know, kind of like fall or bump into it, or the wonder, the something wonderful. Wonder. It's such a good word. I'm open to wonder. If you're not open to wonder, it's going to be difficult for you to have a wonderful experience. And then, and I'm open to sharing the generosity, and you know, and it says that at the end. Does it say that as well? Our planet, you know, sharing our planet is also sharing with, to, in, on the planet. It's like all the many ways of sharing. So these are, you could say, those are things that I have asked when making this show. Things that I use when I talk about the show, when we prepare the show. But there are also things that I think you can ask before you go and see the show. I mean, you don't have to, but I'm just saying these, you know, going to a museum is not like going to a fucking mall, okay? You're not gonna be, it's not an experience that is pre-designed for you to consume. You know that, I know, I'm just saying it because I'm thinking of it. It's a place, an opportunity for you to go and produce, or maybe produce. Or it's a great opportunity for you to be uncertain and soft, and maybe it's okay to be uncertain and soft. Imagine in architecture school, oh, I'm going to be uncertain. But this project is about the uncertain and soft building. But that actually is interesting, right? The tenderness, and not the kind of. But anyway, I know we have other plans, but you know what I mean? So I'm talking about a certain type of energy, or life energy, or inner life, or you know, the river of life in you, or you know how many different ways there are of talking about the way we go about living. That's really all there is to it. Were we supposed to have questions also?
Even though we just ended on open, we were also told the building has to close, so. But I will say that many of these prompts are actually being taken up. Olafur and his team are working with our team at the museum on ways to collect feedback from audience members, and we very much hope that we'll get some of that. I was very curious to hear your questions, but I think we'll be around for a few minutes. And with that, I just want to thank you, Olafur.
Oh, thank you, Johanna.
And thank you.
Thanks.